In the coastal city of Santa Cruz, California, there existed a special kind of neighborhood. The Tannery Art Center apartment complex was more than just housing. It was a carefully crafted community where artists and families lived side by side, creating and sharing their lives together. This 8-acre campus provided affordable living spaces where creativity flourished, where children played in courtyards, while their parents worked on paintings, sculptures, and other artistic endeavors nearby. Among the hundred or so apartments that made up this unique community lived a family of three. Laura Middleton, her husband Michael, and their 8-year-old daughter Madison formed a close-knit unit within this artistic enclave. Madison, whom everyone knew affectionately as Maddie, had found the perfect place to grow up. Her naturally creative spirit thrived in an environment where imagination was valued and nurtured. Maddie was known throughout the complex as Chatty Maddie, a nickname that captured her warm, outgoing nature perfectly. She would talk to anyone and everyone, always making new friends and entertaining people with her bright personality. Her mother, Laura, often remarked on how generous Maddie was, always the first to try and help someone, or stand up for someone who was on their own or needed support. She was described as bright, intuitive, and curious, never without a smile on her face. The little girl loved all things creative just like the community around her. She would spend hours painting little toy animals and creating elaborate plays and stories with them. She loved to sing, dance, and draw, filling her days with the kind of joyful activities that make childhood memorable. In this community of artists, she was surrounded by adults who understood and encouraged her creative impulses. The Tannery Art Center had been designed with community in mind. All the children would hang out in the central courtyard, playing games together while their parents worked or socialized nearby. Everyone in the complex was close bound together by their shared appreciation for art and their commitment to raising their children in a supportive environment. July 26, 2015 arrived as a typical summer Sunday in Santa Cruz. The weather was pleasant, and Maddie was enjoying the last part of her weekend in the way that 8-year-olds do, with enthusiasm and energy. A friend had come over to spend time with the family and was currently engaged in playing a board game with Maddie's mother, Laura, in their apartment. Maddie waited patiently for them to finish their game, but as the afternoon wore on, she decided she wanted to play with her newest treasure. A few days earlier, she had received a scooter as a present, a sleek white Razor scooter that had quickly become her pride and joy. She couldn't wait to take it around the courtyard before the sun began to set. At 4 in the afternoon, several neighbors spotted Maddie as she rode her scooter around the complex. She was wearing a purple dress and her black safety helmet, looking happy and carefree as she navigated the familiar pathways of her neighborhood. She was spotted several more times after this, sometimes stopping to chat with other children, but mostly content to enjoy the simple pleasure of riding her new scooter by herself. The afternoon passed peacefully. Maddie continued her rides around the courtyard and through the various sections of the apartment complex, occasionally waving to neighbors or pausing to pet a dog or admire someone's artwork. At 5:07 in the evening, she was seen passing by some mailboxes, still riding her white scooter, still wearing her purple dress and black helmet. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Madison Middleton. As the sun began to set over Santa Cruz, Laura finished her board game and began to wonder where her daughter had gone. It wasn't unusual for Maddie to spend time outside, but dinner time was approaching, and Laura expected her to return home soon. When Maddie didn't appear, Laura initially assumed she might have encountered another friend and become absorbed in conversation or play. Laura decided to take a walk around the complex to look for her daughter. The Tannery Arts Center, while large, was a close community where everyone knew each other. Laura began going door to door, asking neighbors if they had seen Maddie. With around 100 apartments spread across the 8-acre complex, it was a systematic but increasingly concerning process. With each person who answered their door saying they hadn't seen Maddie, Laura's worry began to mount. This was not like her daughter. Although Maddie was confident and outgoing, she knew the rules about not wandering off by herself, not going too far from home, and not talking to strangers. She was a responsible child who understood boundaries. As the evening grew later and Laura's search continued to yield no results, her concern transformed into genuine panic. Maddie was nowhere to be found. At 6:08 in the evening, Laura made the call that would change everything. 911. Line mom. What's your emergency? The operator heard a panicked mother's voice, reporting that her 8-year-old daughter was missing. Laura provided the crucial details. Madison Middleton, 8 years old, 4 feet tall, approximately 48 pounds, with brown hair. She had last been seen wearing a black helmet and a purple dress, riding a little white scooter around the apartment complex. Officers from the Santa Cruz Police Department responded quickly to Laura's call. They arrived at the Tannery Arts Center and immediately began their initial assessment of the situation. After speaking with Laura and other family members, they learned that Maddie's disappearance was completely out of character for her. The family emphasized that while Maddie was confident and social, she was also responsible and knew not to wander off by herself or go too far from the safety of the complex. She understood the rules about talking to people she didn't know, and she had never before simply vanished without telling anyone where she was going. Despite the concerning nature of Maddie's disappearance, an Amber Alert was not immediately issued. The authorities determined that the case did not meet certain specific criteria required for the emergency alert system that sends out information about endangered missing or abducted children. Police officers began their systematic search of the area. They went door to door throughout the complex, speaking with residents and asking them to check their own properties, garages, storage areas, gardens, and any other spaces where a child might be hiding or might have gone to seek help if she were injured. A neighbor named Kirby spoke with reporters about the search efforts that first evening. She was riding her brand new scooter. It's a white Razor. She had a black helmet on. She was wearing a purple dress, and she was just happy as could be riding around. Kirby explained. When asked about the search efforts, Kirby continued. We've searched the entire tannery door to door. Officers have gone door to door, every loft. We've looked at cameras. We've had search parties all night long. The question of whether Maddie might have gone with a friend was quickly addressed. Not that I can think of at all, came the response when asked about other friends she might have visited. The family was certain she's never left tannery property. She knows where she's supposed to can and cannot be. She was in the courtyard where she was supposed to be. She came over here, and that was the last we saw of her on surveillance. As the first night passed without any sign of Maddie, the search efforts intensified dramatically. By 11 o'clock the following morning, July 27th, 50 FBI officers had joined the case. This was no longer just a local police matter, it had become a major federal investigation. The FBI brought additional resources and expertise to the search. Officers continued going door to door, now expanding their canvas beyond the immediate apartment complex. They requested that everyone in the area look carefully in their garages, check their bins, search their gardens, and sheds anywhere a child might be hiding, injured or unconscious. The complex itself had already been searched thoroughly, from top to bottom during the first night, so the focus now expanded to the outer areas surrounding the Tannery Arts Center. Search crews in orange jackets could be seen fanning out through a large area of Santa Cruz, covering a 4.5 square mile search zone. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Neighbors who had watched Maddie grow up, who had seen her riding her scooter and playing in the courtyard, joined in the search efforts. Hundreds of volunteers arrived to help look for the missing girl. One neighbor expressed the feelings that many in the community shared. "Just wonderful kid. We would have heard her. I don't get this. Nobody gets this. We would have heard she was just right here, right here." Parents who brought their children to dance classes at the Tannery Arts Center learned about the missing girl and were deeply affected. "I mean, it's tragic. I feel terrible. Like I was telling my son, I'm hoping that they're going to find her, sending positive, happy thoughts that she's going to come back happy and healthy." The search continued through the night and into the next day. Volunteers had checked tents in homeless camps and searched as far as Paradise Park. Many had been up all night, driven by the hope that they would find Maddie safe and unharmed. One searcher captured the mood of the community. "We're all feeling a little helpless at this point. We've been up all night." As news of Maddie's disappearance spread, the case began to resonate with people far beyond Santa Cruz. Police received over 1,000 tips from members of the public who wanted to help bring her home safely. Each tip had to be investigated, each potential lead followed up. The massive response from the community showed how much the case had touched people's hearts. Late in the afternoon, on July 27th, police began stopping vehicles entering the Tannery parking lot, speaking with drivers, and looking for any information or signs of the missing girl. At this point, police were still treating the case as a missing persons investigation rather than a kidnapping. As one officer explained to the media, "We're not calling this a kidnapping. We're still early on in our investigation. We're looking for a lost child." However, as the search approached the 24-hour mark, investigators made a strategic decision. With such a small window of time in which Maddie had vanished, less than an hour between when she was last seen and when her mother began looking for her, they felt confident that the answers lay somewhere within the apartment complex itself. The search teams decided to refocus their efforts inward, conducting a more thorough and intensive search of the buildings and grounds of the Tannery Arts Center. Every corner, every storage area, every possible hiding place would be examined with fresh eyes and renewed attention to detail. Just over 24 hours after Maddie had first been reported missing, the search came to a heartbreaking end. At 8 o'clock in the evening, on July 27th, a Santa Cruz police detective was conducting what he described as a secondary and more thorough canvass of the complex. This search included examining a recycling bin located in an enclosed area on the first floor of the parking structure at the Tannery Arts Center. Inside that recycling bin, concealed in a way that was not obvious, or readily apparent, investigators found Maddie's body. The detective who made the discovery later said that everyone's heart sank when they found her, but the team quickly regrouped. What had been a missing persons case was now a major homicide investigation. Police immediately secured the area and began their forensic investigation. Residents of the complex were suddenly herded out and pushed onto the street as the parking structure became a crime scene. The community that had spent more than a day hoping and praying for Maddie's safe return now faced the devastating reality that she would not be coming home. Almost immediately after this tragic discovery, police announced that they had made an arrest in connection with the case. The suspect was a 15-year-old boy who lived in the apartment complex, someone who had been part of the very community that was now mourning Maddie's death. The arrest sent shockwaves through the Tannery Art Center community. The suspect was not a stranger who had somehow infiltrated their safe space. He was one of their own, a teenager who had lived in the complex for years and was known to many of the residents. At the police press conference, officials provided the basic facts of the arrest. There was a 15-year-old male juvenile who resides in an apartment on the property upstairs from the location where Maddie's body was found, and he was nearby when Maddie was located. He was subsequently taken into custody, where he was brought back to the Santa Cruz Police Department and interviewed. The interview process was extensive. Investigators from the Santa Cruz Police Department interviewed this individual into the early morning hours this morning, and he was subsequently arrested for the murder of Madison Middleton. Additionally, investigators have located evidence that links the suspect to this horrific crime. Police determined several key facts during their investigation. It appears that she was lured to the suspect's apartment willingly. Additionally, we've determined that Maddie was murdered inside of the suspect's apartment. They also concluded that the suspect acted alone and not in concert with anyone else. The police chief expressed the emotional toll the case had taken on his department. I would like to thank the members of my staff who worked relentlessly throughout this investigation, many of whom worked 36 hours straight, driven by our desire and hope that we would find Maddie safe. I'm sure all of you can relate to this. As a parent myself, and many of you, I'm sure, are parents, this has just been absolutely devastating for me, personally, and for my staff. My staff was so hopeful that we were going to find her alive. When the news came last night that she was not alive, it was hard. On the evening of July 28th, the Broken community came together for a vigil to honor Maddie's memory. The gathering was a mixture of grief shock and the kind of numb disbelief that follows a tragedy no one could have imagined. One attendee captured the collective mood. A lot of people in town all over have been walking around numb. You know, it's like, that's how I feel. I feel like I've been walking around numb. I couldn't even imagine if it was somebody that I love, somebody that I was close to. Initially, because of his age, the teenager's identity was protected by law. But this changed when Santa Cruz County District Attorney Jeff Roselle made a significant decision. After reviewing the evidence, he announced that the case was serious enough to warrant charging the teenager as an adult rather than keeping it in the juvenile court system. The law allows, under certain circumstances, with certain types of offenses, a determination as to whether or not you want to charge someone as an adult or whether or not they're charged as a juvenile. Based on the information that we know at this point, there do appear to be charges that can be filed as an adult. and we are absolutely considering that. These are the type of charges and the type of offenses that can be charged as an adult. With this decision, the suspect's name was released to the public. He was identified as Adrian Jerry Gonzalez, known to friends and neighbors as AJ. He had lived in the apartment complex for the past 6 years with his mother. The revelation that AJ was the suspect left the community reeling. For those who knew him, the accusation seemed impossible to believe. Neighbors described him as likable and polite someone who often spent time outside with the younger children in the complex. AJ was known for teaching the other kids yo-yo tricks and showing them how to play the piano. He had even worked as a counselor for younger children, a role that required trust and responsibility. As one neighbor put it, "We love this guy. All of us, if you ask us what you think of him, would tell you he's an outstanding kid, our poster child." Everyone loved and trusted him, which made the charges against him seem unfathomable. Initially, many residents thought there must have been some kind of accident, and that AJ had panicked and tried to cover it up rather than seek help. The idea that he could have deliberately harmed Maddie was too difficult for the community to process. However, some people pointed to signs that perhaps they had missed. AJ's social media posts, when examined more closely, contained disturbing captions that suggested a more troubled interior life than anyone had realized. There were also stories about him having abused his dog years earlier, and friends mentioned that he had sometimes made concerning statements about jumping off buildings. What had initially drawn police attention to AJ on the day of the search was his behavior. He had been watching intently as officers searched the recycling bins, and the moment the officers discovered Maddie's body, even before he could have seen what they had found, he started to run. AJ had been actively involved in the search efforts from the beginning, asking everyone questions about what they knew and whether anyone had heard anything. At the time, this had seemed like the natural response of a concerned community member, but in retrospect, investigators realized it might have been something else entirely. When police questioned him after he ran from the scene, they quickly realized that something was very wrong and that he had something to hide. Due to his age and legal protections, they could not go into detail about what he had said during questioning or what evidence they had uncovered in his apartment. The medical examination of Maddie's body revealed the horrific details of what she had endured. Her mouth had been bound with tape, and she had been beaten and sexually assaulted before being strangled and stabbed. The brutality of the crime was difficult for investigators and the community to comprehend. During formal questioning, AJ eventually admitted to what he had done. According to his confession, he had lured Maddie into his apartment by offering her ice cream. This was not a difficult deception. Maddie knew AJ well and trusted him completely. As she was helping herself to the ice cream, he attacked her from behind. After binding and assaulting her, he strangled her and then forced her body into the bag where she was later discovered. During this process, he realized that she was still alive, so he subsequently stabbed her in the neck. According to the medical examiner's findings, Maddie ultimately died of positional asphyxiation from her position in the recycling bin. District Attorney Jeff Roselle was resolute in his response to the crime. "We are going to bring him to justice. He is looking at life in prison." Roselle also stated that he believed charging and trying AJ as an adult was the only appropriate course of action, describing him as a sexual deviant with no place in society. Judge Salazar agreed with the district attorney's assessment and determined that AJ's trial should proceed through the adult court system rather than the juvenile system. He cited Proposition 57, which had been passed by voters and allowed judges to decide whether a teenager should be tried as an adult for serious crimes. Despite his confession, AJ entered a plea of not guilty when his case came to court. His defense team immediately began fighting to transfer his case back to juvenile court using a controversial new law called Senate Bill 1391, which had just come into effect. SB 11391 prohibited anyone aged 14 or 15 from being tried as an adult regardless of the severity of their crime. AJ's defense team argued that his actions stemmed from a difficult home and school life, and that he was socially awkward factors they claimed should be considered in determining the appropriate court system for his case. However, people who knew the Gonzalez family disputed this characterization. They said that AJ's mother, Reggie, had left his father when their relationship had turned violent, specifically to protect her children. Her children were described as her biggest priority, and neighbors said that AJ had been showered with love and affection from a caring family that had done their best given their circumstances. While it was true that Reggie had battled drug and alcohol issues in the past, she was clean and sober at the time of the crime and was working hard to repair any damage that might have been done during her struggle with addiction. Police and prosecutors argued that many people have tougher upbringings than AJ had experienced, and that this was not a typical outcome of such circumstances. They found it heartbreaking that the defense would try to use his mother and his upbringing as some kind of justification for what he had done to Maddie. Thousands of people signed a petition attempting to prevent SB 1391 from applying to AJ's case, but their efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. After much deliberation and multiple appeals by the defense team, the California Supreme Court ruled that his case should indeed be transferred to juvenile court. The California Supreme Court's decision to uphold Senate Bill 1391 in AJ's case was met with widespread disappointment and anger. The court voted to maintain the law, stating that 14 and 15-year-olds cannot be transferred to adult court regardless of the severity of their crimes. The ruling meant that AJ, who had been held in the adult system at the Santa Cruz County Jail for several years while his case was being decided, would now be transferred to the juvenile system for trial and sentencing. Maddie's family was devastated by this decision. Their attorney expressed their feelings. "We are extremely disappointed, and I spoke to some of the family members, and they are absolutely devastated. Based on all the evidence we heard in 9 weeks from experts throughout the state, this is not somebody who's going to be safe to be released." Supporters of the juvenile court system argued that the decision was appropriate. In juvenile hall, he responded very well to the programming, the services, the support, and the structure of the hall. Kids can get treatment and aren't just thrown away into an adult prison where they're going to learn very bad habits. However, this perspective was met with huge backlash from the community and the victim's family. They were horrified that something so awful could happen to someone so vulnerable and be met with what they saw as potentially just a few years in prison. Judge Salazar himself expressed his frustration with the legal constraints he faced. He said that his hands were tied by the change in the law and that he had no choice in the matter. Allowing all 14 and 15-year-olds accused of first-degree murder and other violent offenses to remain in the juvenile court is not promoting public safety, because not all of them can be safely rehabilitated. Following the Supreme Court's decision in April 2021, Adrian Jerry Gonzalez made a significant change to his legal strategy. After years of maintaining his not guilty plea, he decided to accept responsibility for his actions. In court, AJ pleaded guilty to 6 felony counts, including the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Madison Middleton. This plea came more than 5 years after the crime had been committed, bringing some measure of closure to the long legal proceedings. Before his sentencing, AJ addressed the court and Maddie's family directly. His statement was brief, but seemed to acknowledge the magnitude of what he had done. I understand there is very little I can say after all the pain and suffering I have caused. My goal is to work on my issues so no one else has to experience what you have endured. I am aware that does not change the fact that I have brought you tragedy, loss, and devastation. I am hopeful that when I take the time to apologize, that you may accept my apologies for the actions that I have done and what they have brought you. Maddie's father, Michael, responded to AJ's statement with remarkable grace and forgiveness. Michael said he had accepted his daughter's loss and that he had chosen to forgive AJ. That doesn't make anything easier. It just allows me peace. The alternative could be to hold to the darkness, but this would only consume my soul. I refuse to poison my soul in existence. Forgiveness is the only path, and I believe that Madison would agree. Laura, Maddie's mother, described the devastating impact her daughter's death had on her life. She explained that the loss had left her suffering with depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, making it impossible for her to work. Even AJ's attorney expressed relief that the case was finally coming to an end, noting that this would spare Maddie's family from having to endure any more proceedings than they already had. The difference between adult and juvenile sentencing was stark and controversial. In the adult court system, AJ would have been facing 126 years to life in prison. However, the juvenile court system operated under entirely different principles and limitations. Judge Salazar imposed the maximum sentence he was legally allowed to give under the circumstances. Because the law as it stood determined that AJ's maximum term of confinement would end when he turned 25, he would be eligible for release in October 2024. The judge noted that there was no guarantee AJ would be released in 2024, as the court could be petitioned to extend his time. However, District Attorney Jeff Rozelle was pessimistic about the likelihood of such an extension. I think it's likely he will be out at 25, and I think it's an absolute travesty of justice, and I think it's unsafe for the community. Rozelle elaborated on his concerns about the one-size-fits-all approach of the juvenile justice reform. The bottom line is certain changes need to be made in juvenile justice, juvenile reform, of course. But one-size-fits-all legislation that takes no account at all for people like Adrian. We had experts who said they had never ever seen anybody present like him ever in a 30-year career as a child psychologist. Anyone who thinks that this person is going to be healthy and fixed and able to come out into society at the age of 25 is mistaken. In addition to his custodial sentence, AJ was required to register for life as a sex offender and pay $22,000 in restitution fees. Maddie's grandfather, Dan, spoke about the sentencing and its broader implications. It's terrifying that most likely he will be released at 25. This law affects not only my family and our community here, but anyone else who suffered a crime at the hands of a juvenile. I believe in reform in the system for juveniles and adults. This wasn't a crime of robbery or drugs. This was a sociopathic murder. All the experts have testified that AJ is unlike any they've seen before, and he's the next Edmund Kemper, so all of us should be terrified. The sentencing sparked immediate community response. People gathered outside the Santa Cruz County Courthouse to protest what they saw as an inadequate punishment for such a heinous crime. The community that had supported Maddie's family throughout the long legal process felt betrayed by a system that seemed to prioritize the rehabilitation of the perpetrator over justice for the victim. Many residents expressed fear about AJ's eventual release. The idea that someone who had committed such a brutal crime against a child could be back in the community in just a few years was deeply unsettling to parents and neighbors who remembered Maddie's bright smile and generous spirit. The case had become a focal point for broader discussions about juvenile justice reform and the appropriate balance between rehabilitation and public safety, while supporters of SB 1391 argued that it provided necessary protections for young offenders and opportunities for rehabilitation. Critics pointed to cases like AJ's as evidence that some crimes and some individuals required different approaches. The controversy extended beyond Santa Cruz, with legal experts, victims' rights advocates, and juvenile justice reformers weighing in on the implications of the case. The tension between the desire to provide second chances for young people who make mistakes and the need to protect society from those who commit the most serious crimes remained unresolved. During the years of legal proceedings, an unlikely relationship developed between two mothers whose lives had been forever changed by AJ's actions. Laura Middleton and Reggie Gonzalez. AJ's mother found themselves bound together by their shared grief, though from very different perspectives. Reggie was devastated by what her son had done. Neighbors would frequently see her crying at the memorial that had been created for Maddie in the apartment complex. Laura, despite her own overwhelming grief, would often sit with Reggie, offering comfort and support during these moments of shared sorrow. Laura's compassion toward Reggie demonstrated remarkable strength and understanding. As she explained, "I just love her, and we both lost our children that day. That's the tragic truth. I don't fault her." Laura recognized that while she had lost her daughter to violence, Reggie had lost her son to his own actions, a different kind of loss, but a loss nonetheless. This relationship between the two mothers showed the complex human dimensions of such tragedies extending far beyond the immediate victim and perpetrator to encompass families and communities that must find ways to heal and move forward. However, more pain was yet to come for Maddie's family. Her father, Michael, had taken to carrying Maddie's ashes with him in his car, wanting to keep her close to him wherever he went. Tragically, someone broke into the car and stole the ashes. Despite efforts to recover them, Maddie's ashes were never found, adding another layer of grief to an already devastated family. The tight-knit community at the Tannery Arts Center found ways to honor Maddie's memory through the creative arts that had been such an important part of her life and their shared community. Artists in the complex created paintings and other works dedicated to her memory, which were displayed throughout the area where she had lived and played. Maddie had loved animals, particularly wolves, and this passion was remembered in a beautiful sand sculpture of a wolf created on a beach near her home. The Rio Theater displayed her name outside the building, ensuring that her memory remained visible to the broader Santa Cruz community. A celebration of life was held for Maddie, drawing hundreds of people who had been touched by her story. The mayor of Santa Cruz, Don Lane, commemorated her life by declaring October 4th, 2015, her birthday, as Madison Middleton Day, ensuring that her memory would be officially recognized each year. Perhaps most meaningfully, Maddie's family channeled their grief into action by founding an organization called MCASC, Maddie Child, Angel of Santa Cruz. Their motto, "Before you go, let someone know," captured an essential safety message. The organization's aim was to educate children and parents about safety and protection, hoping to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. When asked how he wanted the public to remember his daughter, Michael Middleton spoke with the kind of love that transcends grief. "Madison was the love of my life. She brought joy to everyone she met. She was charming. She was brilliant. She was creative, artistic, loving. She loved animals, especially dogs and wolves. Very playful. She could hold her own with adults. She wasn't afraid of anything. She's beautiful, loving, and she's gone. But at least I'll know she'll always be perfect little 8-year-old, and I miss her." Laura added her own tribute. "Maddie was the light and love of her life and brought so much joy to so many people. She was growing up beautifully bright, perky fun, and generous of heart. She was the best thing I ever made." The Tannery Art Center apartment complex was forever changed by the events of July 2015. The little community that everyone had worked so hard to create, once so close and safe, had been altered in ways that could never be fully repaired. The sense of security that had allowed children to play freely in the courtyards, that had enabled neighbors to trust each other implicitly, had been shattered. Parents became more cautious, more watchful. The easy trust that had characterized relationships within the complex gave way to a more guarded awareness of potential dangers. Yet the community also demonstrated remarkable resilience. Rather than allowing fear to completely destroy what they had built together, residents found ways to honor Maddie's memory while working to rebuild their sense of safety and connection. The artistic nature of the community provided outlets for processing grief and trauma, allowing residents to express their feelings through creative works. The memorial sites for Maddie became gathering places where neighbors could come together to remember not just the tragedy of her death, but the joy she had brought to their lives. Her laughter in the courtyards, her friendly greetings, her creative spirit. These memories became part of the complex's ongoing story. Children who had known Maddie grew up with a more complex understanding of the world than they might have otherwise developed. They learned about loss, about the importance of safety, and about the ways that communities can come together in the face of tragedy. The adults in the community grappled with questions that had no easy answers. How do you balance openness and trust with the need for vigilance? How do you maintain the creative, collaborative spirit of a place like the Tannery Art Center while acknowledging that dangers can come from within as well as from outside? The case of Madison Middleton became more than just a local tragedy. It became a focal point for national discussions about juvenile justice, community safety, and the protection of children. Legal scholars and policymakers examined the implications of laws like SB 1391, debating whether such legislation adequately balanced the needs of young offenders with the safety of the community. Maddie's story also highlighted the importance of paying attention to warning signs and taking concerns about troubled young people seriously. The revelation that AJ had shown disturbing behavior patterns before the crime, including alleged animal abuse and concerning social media posts raised questions about missed opportunities for intervention. Child safety advocates used Maddie's case to emphasize the importance of teaching children about personal safety while still allowing them to experience the joy and freedom that should be part of childhood. The Before You Go, Let Someone Know message from the MCASC Foundation became part of safety education programs in schools and communities. The case also demonstrated the long-lasting impact of violent crime on families and communities. Years after the immediate crisis had passed, Maddie's family continued to deal with trauma grief and the ongoing challenges of navigating a legal system that often seemed inadequate to address the magnitude of their loss. The community at the Tannery Art Center faced its own ongoing process of healing and adaptation. Some residents eventually moved away, unable to remain in a place so closely associated with tragedy. Others stayed committed to preserving the positive aspects of their community while working to ensure that such a tragedy could never happen again. The case raised important questions about how communities can maintain openness and trust while still protecting their most vulnerable members. It highlighted the delicate balance between creating environments where children can thrive and ensuring adequate supervision and safety measures. For law enforcement and child protection professionals, Maddie's case became a study in the importance of thorough investigation, community cooperation, and the challenges of identifying and addressing potential threats from within seemingly safe environments. The story also underscored the resilience of the human spirit. Despite experiencing unimaginable loss, Maddie's parents found ways to channel their grief into positive action through their foundation work. Their ability to forgive, to reach out to others in pain, and to work toward preventing similar tragedies showed remarkable strength and grace. Today, the lessons learned from Madison Middleton's case continue to influence discussions about child safety, juvenile justice, and community protection. The MCASC Foundation continues its work educating families about safety awareness, ensuring that Maddie's legacy includes positive change that may protect other children. The legal questions raised by AJ's case remain relevant as communities across the country grapple with how to handle serious crimes committed by young offenders. The tension between rehabilitation and public safety, between second chances and accountability, continues to challenge lawmakers and communities. At the Tannery Art Center, life has moved forward, but Maddie's memory remains woven into the fabric of the community. New families have moved in, children play in the courtyards where she once rode her scooter, and artists continue to create in the studios that surround those spaces. The memorial sites created for Maddie serve as quiet reminders of both the joy she brought to her community and the importance of vigilance in protecting the children who remain. Her story has become part of the complex's history, not the end of its story, but a chapter that changed how residents understand both the beauty and the fragility of the community they share. Laura's words about her daughter continue to resonate. Maddie was indeed the best thing she ever made, a bright light whose brief time on earth touched many lives, and whose memory continues to inspire efforts to protect other children and support other families. In the end, Madison Middleton's story is both a tragedy and a testament, a reminder of how quickly life can change, how precious childhood innocence is, and how communities must work together to protect their most vulnerable members, while still allowing space for the joy, creativity, and trust that make life worth living. The little girl who loved to paint toy animals, create stories, and ride her white scooter through the courtyards of the Tannery Arts Center is gone. But the love she shared and the lessons learned from her loss continue to ripple outward, touching new lives and shaping new efforts to build safer, more caring communities for all children.